Welcome to the Still Curtain podcast powered by FanSided and StillCurtain.com. It's Monday, November 17th, and the Pittsburgh Steelers are 6-4 after a 34-12 win over the Cincinnati Bengals in Week 11 at Acrisure Stadium, at a very windy Acrisure Stadium. I'm Josh Yourish, and today we're going to talk about the defensive adjustments that the Steelers have made that might actually be pretty meaningful and have this team trending in the right direction. We're going to talk about some different things that are happening on the offensive side of the football that some I'm encouraged by, some I'm worried about, regardless of who is at quarterback. And obviously, we're going to start with the Aaron Rodgers injury. Early reports, Ian Rappaport, I believe, was the first to report it, that it is suspected to be a slight fracture in Rodgers' left wrist. He's undergoing more imaging today. It's currently 1:36 p.m. Eastern time on the East Coast here, and we don't know yet how long he'll be out, but Rappaport reported that he's 50-50 to play against the 7-3 Chicago Bears in Week 12, so that's certainly of note. He suffered the injury at the end of the first half. You probably know that if you're tuning into this podcast, when he was kind of snowed under by a couple of Bengals after throwing a ball into the back of the end zone where it looked like he was kind of trying to throw it away. And then Mason Rudolph came in the second half. The Steelers pulled away, thanks in large part to two defensive scores, but also thanks somewhat to the play of Mason Rudolph, who I thought was pretty good. And we can kind of talk about that performance. Mike Florio of Pro Football Talk, obviously NBC, wrote today about the injury and about, that they're going to do further testing and don't know the situation. But if it is actually 50-50, I thought he made a good point. Like, this very realistically could be the final 7 games of Aaron Rodgers' Hall of Fame career. He's probably going to do whatever he can to possibly get out on that field. So it's 50-50. He's probably going to try to, I think as Florio put it, put his right thumb on the scale to play. And I think that's a really good analysis of the situation. Like, if Rodgers reportedly pushed to play in the second half and the Steelers held him out to go with Rudolph. So I don't know. I don't know if there's a ton of insight into the Steelers not playing him in the second half, and that meaning that they're going to be cautious with him for this stretch run, or at least for next week against the Bears. If it is a fracture, how more healed is a fracture going to be 2 weeks out from 1 week out? Obviously, if it's a slight fracture, somewhat, but it's not necessarily that he'll be 100%. So then you're just kind of weighing risks at that point. And with Rodgers approaching the end of his, probably his career, certainly the end of his contract in Pittsburgh on a 1-year deal, it feels likely that he'll probably push to play, especially in one last trip to Chicago, a Bears franchise that he is 24-5 against all time, with 64 touchdowns to 10 interceptions. So, I wouldn't be surprised if he does play. I kind of think the best case scenario, though, for the Steelers, maybe not for Rodgers, but for the Steelers, is to go with Mason Rudolph in at least in Week 12, to give him one full start against a defense. He played a whole half, but it was against one of the historically worst defenses in like the recent NFL. So against a defense that is not great, but is at least competent, I would like to see Rudolph for an entire game. You get that data point. You get to know, okay, are some of the issues with the Steelers offense, or are they issues with Aaron Rodgers? Are we living in this shotgun quick game world because that's the best option for our offense? Or is it the best option for Aaron Rodgers? And if we can do more bootleg, longer dropbacks, have a quarterback that's willing to stand in the pocket, can we access the intermediate and deep passing game? I want more data points on that. Like, I don't think Mason Rudolph is an NFL starting quarterback, but I think he's a top tier backup. And he's proven that, multiple times over in Pittsburgh. It didn't go well in Tennessee last year, but I would like to see that for a game, because I think it's a whole hell of a lot harder if you say this injury is not enough to keep Rodgers out in week 12, and then maybe Rodgers plays poorly in week 12, either because of the injury or because he's aging and has been playing poorly for a few weeks now. It is then a lot harder to bench a Rodgers that you have deemed healthy than it is to keep him out when he is dealing with this injury and has not yet come back. And you get your data points on Mason Rudolph and what the offense looks like. Because if Rudolph takes off, then you ride with him down the stretch as you did 2 years ago, when he led the Steelers to a playoff appearance and, kind of threw a couple punches with the Bills up in that playoff game. But if you play Rodgers now, you're pretty much tying yourself to Rodgers for the rest of the season, which ultimately is not the end of the world, because I'm not like dying to have another go with Mason Rudolph. I think we know what the ceiling is there, for him as a player, but I do kind of think, I tend to believe the ceiling might be a little bit higher for the Steelers offense with Rudolph. So let's get into a couple of those, the reasons why. The wrist injury, right? It could force him to play even more from shotgun, because it's going to be harder to take those under center snaps, harder to do any, handoffs to the left with his left hand. So pretty much everything might be out of shotgun. They're already running a lot of offense out of shotgun. And there are some numbers that say like that's not a bad thing for the Steelers, right? They're 13th in EPA per dropback out of the shotgun in the NFL this year, 14th in EPA per rush, 17th in DVOA. From under center, they're 26th in EPA per dropback, 13th in EPA per rush, and 22nd in DVOA. To me, that's a Rodgers stat. Like, that's obviously not an Arthur Smith stat. Arthur Smith, loves to go under center, outside zone, under center, play action. That's the type of stuff that he wants to get to, and a lot of the stuff he got to once Rudolph came in the second half. I think you're kind of neutering yourself in a pretty severe way, even though those numbers aren't great from under center with Rodgers, if you play a Rodgers that can only go out of the shotgun, because then everything is even more quick game oriented. You can't move the pocket for him as easily in the launch point to get him outside the pocket as they've tried to do, especially early in games, with the bootlegs and different things like that, which can try to get him a bit more comfortable, try to get him on the move away from pressure. I think you lose a lot of that. I know you lose a lot of that. If you go out of shotgun, you lose a lot of the impact of play action. Maybe you're living in more of like an RPO world. And I really don't like that with the Steelers pass catchers. I think this team's best when it can go under center with heavy personnel and run the football, play action off of it. We just haven't seen it that often because Rodgers is an aging quarterback, and aging quarterbacks don't love long 7-step dropbacks with a hard play fake where they have to turn their back to the defense. Like, it's just a reality, and I don't blame them. I wouldn't want to get hit either. I'm sure it hurts a lot more at 41 than it did 31 and 21, but it takes an element away from the run game, from the explosive passing attack, and we've seen the explosive passing attack really, really fall off. We didn't see it with Rudolph in the second half. Game script is a big reason why. But I think he has a better chance to push the ball down the field, especially because of especially in structure. Like, any of the deep targets we've seen from Rodgers this year have been either quick game deep balls, which are technically like 20 or more yard targets, but they're out of his hand really quickly, right? So it's not necessarily you're letting something read out down the field, trying to manipulate safeties and things like that. Like, you're just seeing a one-on-one and you're chucking. Or he's trying to buy time like he used to be so good at. He's okay at it now. And then throwing outside of structure. You think there are a couple deep balls to Metcalf, a couple that haven't counted, one really early in the season that was just insane throw to Pat Freiermuth that I don't think counted because of a penalty. But that's where you're getting to any type of vertical stretch in the pass game. Rudolph, he's going to stand in there and he's going to deliver the ball where it's, in most cases, where it's supposed to go. How accurate he is with that throw, How much he can create if he is pressured, not a lot, and unclear on the first question. But he's going to do it. The willingness is really important, and we saw him hit a fairly deep strike to Roman Wilson on a longer developing play downfield, something that we just haven't seen from Rodgers in a really long time. Rodgers against the Bengals was over 3 on throws over 10 yards downfield over the last 2 weeks, and this includes obviously one of the worst starts of his career. He's 3 for 13 for 45 yards with an interception on throws over 10 yards downfield. And some of that was in garbage time against the Chargers. So it doesn't like really count. So the Steelers just nothing is over 10 yards. And another really good stat about that, Derek Bell of Steelers Depot had it. It's from Next Gen Stats. He had it on social media. Heading into week 11, the Steelers have the high or had, I'm sure it probably went up actually, the highest rate of passing yards coming after the catch at 68% in the Next Gen Stats era. So that's since 2016. That's just a massive number of their passing production coming with receivers having the ball in their hands when they don't have a group of receivers that's particularly amazing in that capacity. Like you don't have Deebo Samuel in his prime or somebody like that. So that's a quarterback thing. That's a structure of the offense thing. And with no vertical stretch, I think you're seeing defenses creep down closer to the line of scrimmage, which I said was going to happen early in the year because it's exactly what happened late in Ben's career. They creep down more. They play more press. They dare you to hold on to the ball longer because they trust either they can get pressure or you can't beat them as a scrambler or out of structure creator. And I think Rodgers is proving that he just can't do that anymore. He had one scramble. I think it went for a first down, but that's not enough to stop teams from playing that way against him with, a lot of bodies in coverage and pressing at the line. And the Steelers don't have wide receivers that can really beat that. The Bengals did a good job. A terrible defense actually did a good job taking away Rodgers' quick game attack. And maybe some of this is him hunting for those bigger plays because he knows they're not happening. But his time to throw was 3.69 average seconds. Almost 4 seconds. That's insane. That's ridiculously high for like anyone in the NFL. For a 41-year-old quarterback, that's crazy. Luckily, there wasn't anybody who could really get pressure because Trey Hendrickson continues to be out and Shamar Stewart was out and another pass rusher went down pretty early in the game. I think it was Sample for Cincinnati. So they just didn't get any quick pressure. Rodgers averaged 9 yards an attempt on dropbacks over 2.5 seconds in the game, but his lack of mobility and deep accuracy, that's not a reliable way to live, especially against teams that are going to get pressure on you in quicker than about 4 seconds. And Tommy Jagai of stillcurtain.com and the Still Curtain podcast on Wednesdays, check it out, him and Shane, and check out stillcurtain.com. If you like this podcast, you'll love the written content there as well. He had a great cut up on social media this morning of Rodgers just like inviting pressure, right? He was pressured on 58.8% of his dropbacks on Sunday. That's not an offensive line stat. Sacks are a quarterback stat. I think we've like established that fairly well in football conversations. Pressures, quick pressures are an offensive line stat. Pressures in general can be murky. And this is a case where you need to watch the film to understand what's going on. Because like, if you just look at those numbers, you go, oh my God, how could Rodgers ever succeed? He was almost pressured on 60% of his drop. He was pressured on almost 60% of his dropbacks. What quarterback could 30, 41 or 31 or 21? A lot of that was his doing, like almost all of it. And he's just drifting. He's bouncing. He's uncomfortable in the pocket. So his offensive linemen don't know where he's going to be. He's moving into pressure. He's moving into sacks. It is just like irresponsible quarterback play. And that's crazy from a future Hall of Famer, but this is what happens when you get older and you don't want to take hits and you're just flighty in the pocket. And teams know that, so they're playing you a certain way. Mason Rudolph in the second half came in and for context on those pressure dropbacks from Rodgers, he had a 4.63 second time to throw. Just one sack because, again, the Bengals pass rush is so bad. But almost like 5 seconds, it's a small sample, but that's bananas. Like, that's just, in a lot of ways, kind of unplayable unless you're Lamar Jackson. So concerned. Consider me concerned for the way Rodgers is playing lately. And more proof in that direction is that when Rudolph came in, he's far more comfortable in the pocket, was able to just stand in there. He was pressured on 12% of his dropbacks, right? So he, despite still having a 2.94 average second average time to throw, which is pretty high. It's not like cataclysmically high, but it's pretty high. And he wasn't pressured very often because he was static in the pocket. The offensive line knew where he was going to be. They could give him a clean pocket. And like, that is just so much more functional for the entire offense. The way Rudolph played in the second half was so much more functional. It's so much more predictable in terms of your receivers know where you're going to be. Your offensive line knows where you're going to be. Your receivers know that they might actually get the ball on time and in structure. Like, nothing with Rodgers lately has been in structure. It's either like just an alert at the line. There's a called run play, pop pass to DK, which teams have really taken away a lot of, or it's I'm bouncing around, I'm drifting in the pocket. Okay, scramble drill, Darnell Washington target. It's just not a good way to be able to call an offense and run an offense. And he's also just not a super accurate quarterback anymore. Like, he was he finished with a negative 2.9% completion percentage over expectation, according to Next Gen Stats. And you need to be super precise to run that type of offense and run an offense that relies on quick game and yards after the catch. Rudolph, he might give them a better chance pushing the ball on the field to the deep intermediate parts of the field. But I think we definitely saw, even though he had a 2.9 average depth of target, I think we definitely saw like he's more comfortable in the pocket, more willing to drive the ball down the field. That average depth of target would have been a lot higher if that DK offensive pass interference call didn't happen, because that looked like a really pretty nice deep ball, which we haven't seen a lot of from Rodgers in recent weeks. Rudolph finished with just one pass over 10 yards downfield. It went for 17 yards. It was that Roman Wilson completion. 51 of his 127 yards came on completions behind the line of scrimmage. So again, it's a lot of yards after the catch. It's a lot of screen game and things like that. But you have at least like more of a credible threat that your quarterback's actually going to throw it beyond the sticks on third down. He's actually going to stand in there and read it out to wait for a receiver to come open. And I tend to think that's a better outcome for this offense, even if I'm not a huge fan of Mason Rudolph as a player. I just want to see it. Like, I don't want to just throw Rodgers away. It's Rudolph's team for the rest of the season. But I think this injury, while unfortunate for it's a person and a great player and a legend of the game, it can give you an opportunity to say, okay, the Bears game is Rudolph's. Let's see what it looks like. And then we'll make a decision and go forward. Because I don't have enough. Half of football is not enough for me to make a judgment. It's certainly not enough for Mike Tomlin to make a judgment on who is going to be his quarterback going forward in the playoff push. But to this game, we can't take a ton away from Rudolph looking pretty good against one of the worst defenses in like recent history of the NFL. Can we take something away from Rodgers not looking so good against it? Maybe. Because he really didn't after kind of torching them in the loss in week 7. I think that's somewhat noteworthy. I'm not gonna freak out on. I mean, to me, how he played against the Chargers is the more damning evidence that he's washed up than anything that happened against Cincinnati. But it's another data point in that direction that like he's not playing in structure. He's not playing responsible football. He's not getting to things on time. He's not comfortable in the pocket. And I think all of those things are really obvious. If you watch it, the numbers back it up. So I just want to see, like, to me, as I kind of laid out at the beginning, the best case scenario is Rudolph starts with Rodgers injured, because if Rodgers plays, there's really no chance Tomlin's going to go back to Rudolph and bench a healthy Aaron Rodgers. But if Rudolph plays this game, then it's kind of open. If he continues to play well, okay, you can ride with him. But if Rodgers makes this start, I think Rodgers is the quarterback the rest of the way this season, and probably in a limited fashion where almost everything kind of has to be out of the shotgun. And a lot of it has been already, but that's not my favorite way for an Arthur Smith offense to run. I'm certain it's not Arthur Smith's favorite way for his offense to run. So I just want to see it. I want to see it with Rudolph. I want to see what things look like. I think you can get a better evaluation of Roman Wilson, of your young offensive line. Like, that's valuable too. Because I think we can say for certain that Broderick Jones is not good. But Falatanu, it's hard to tell when your quarterback is running into sacks and running into pressures. And same with McCormick. And I think we know Zach Frazier is good. But you just need more. The word I'm coming back to is like responsible quarterback play, where things are on time, things are in structure, and you kind of know what to expect, so you can get a better read on the rest of the unit. And I'd like to see that for a week. So I'm team Rodgers down for a week. Hopefully he gets healthy. Then you can kind of go from there after you see a Mason Rudolph start. If you're a fan of Pittsburgh Steelers football, please consider subscribing to the Still Curtain podcast on YouTube or wherever you get your podcasts, and check out all the written work on stillcurtain.com. They're doing a fantastic job over there all season long. A few more thoughts on the offense before we talk about the defense, which is kind of what I think is more instructive coming out of that game, because the Bengals offense is actually good. The Bengals defense is a complete nightmare. The Steelers offensive line is not a good run blocking unit. I'm not the first person to say this, but watching that game back and looking at the tape, it wasn't good. It hasn't been good a lot of the season. It wasn't particularly good against the Bengals, the worst run defense in the NFL. The Steelers ran for 111 yards, and it's easy to go, well, there's the offensive line road grading. A lot of that is because Jaylen Warren is a freaking superstar, man. He's so good. He averaged 4.3 yards after contact per carry in this one. He's 13th in the NFL this season at 3.24 yards after contact per carry. So a lot of that is, what are you getting that isn't blocked for you? A better metric for that even is next gen stats, rushing yards over expectation, which kind of charts the locations of players in the blocking and how many rushing yards an average running back would be expected to get on any given play, how many more you're getting than that, obviously. Warren's fifth in the NFL, not in rushing yards over expectation, but in rushing yards over expectation percentage. So what percent of his rushing yards are coming over expectation? He's fifth in the NFL. So that's a sign that you're not getting a lot blocked up for you. You're doing more with less. And that's just another point of Jaylen Warren needs more touches, man. But also, this offensive line need to spend more resources continuing to upgrade it. I think the coaching is a problem. Like, I think they need to move on from Pat Meyer as their offensive line coach. The failed development of Broderick Jones and others is a good reason why. But the offensive line is just, they're not good at run blocking. They don't block outside zone well, which is like Arthur Smith wants to make the entire thing out of outside zone. I don't think they block it very well. I think they block some of the gap scheme stuff a little bit better. They do some more of that with the jumbo personnel. Spencer Anderson in that role, I like that they're doing it. I don't think he's been particularly good in that role in the past couple of weeks. I think he's getting knocked back pretty often. I think Darnell Washington is a much bigger reason that it's successful. So the run game, like I have some qualms with, yet I still think they should run the ball more because that's how good Jaylen Warren is. He's just the best player on their offense. The Lions against the Eagles, and the Eagles were just wrecking shop in the pass game. Jared Goff in the cold, but the Eagles, it's about the Eagles' four-man pass rush. Like with Jalen Phillips, now they're freaky. Last night they were wrecking shop in the pass game. So the Lions just said, okay, they didn't win, but Jahmyr Gibbs, like, this is your game, man. And for stretches, he took over. I think Jaylen Warren is 90% of that. And 90% of Jahmyr Gibbs is somebody you should be giving more and more touches to. Obviously, he got hurt. That's a big reason why, but this is a season-long thing, not just a Bengals thing. An interesting stat that kind of feeds into a conversation that we've had on this podcast a couple of times. I've brought up, we've talked about in instant reaction shows. Why do the Steelers tend to abandon the run? Is that an Arthur Smith thing? It happened against the Packers. It happened pretty early against the Chargers. I think it happened in the first half against the Bengals after the first scripted drive. Is that an Arthur Smith thing? Is that an Aaron Rodgers thing? I think a case for it being an Aaron Rodgers thing, which is where I've kind of settled, is he has so much autonomy at the line of scrimmage. He's going to get you into the right play. And I think he does that pretty well and has done that pretty well this year, changing protections, things like that. Zach Frazier obviously helps a lot, changing those protections and getting them into the right calls. But a number to help make that case that Rodgers is one of the reasons that they're throwing the ball a lot more after those scripted drives where he doesn't maybe have that autonomy. Just 19% of Jaylen Warren's runs have come into 8+ man boxes, which is like not an alarmingly low or high number. It's like kind of average. It's probably closer to the lower level, lower side, which is typically good. Like you don't want to be running into 8-man boxes like crazy. This isn't the 90s. But with how much jumbo personnel the Steelers play, with how much they use multiple tight ends and they use condensed formations, which is just going to bring more corners and safeties and everyone to load those boxes, that only being at 19%, like in general, I just think you should give Warren more opportunities even against a stacked box because I think he's that good. But considering the context of the Steelers' offense with those condensed formations, with the heavy personnel, only 19% of his runs coming against those stacked boxes, to me says Rodgers sees the 8-man box and everything in his brain from so many years in the NFL goes, oh, I got an 8-man box. I'm throwing it. I'm one of the best quarterbacks in the history of the NFL. Like we're checking into a pass. We're not running into this. And that's the right decision. And I see why that happens. But I think that's part of the reason you could be better off with a quarterback that has maybe a little less autonomy at the line of scrimmage, like a Mason Rudolph wouldn't. And last year there was that conversation with Russell Wilson as well, right? Like he was changing the plays a lot more at the line of scrimmage, getting them into the right calls while Justin Fields wasn't afforded that leeway. And I think that helped Russell Wilson initially. Eventually that offense just crumbled regardless of anything. In this case, I think there should be a bit more stubbornness of this is a run. Like we're not tagging it with a pass. We're not giving you an alert. We're running it. We're running it from under center. Because I think especially after the scripted drives, even when you do see the run game, it's a lot more out of shotgun because that gives Rodgers more of an opportunity to survey the defense, get the call he wants. Like that's just where he wants to live. And I don't blame him at his age, but I don't think it's the best thing for the Steelers offense. So maybe you get more of the under center, more of those runs, and more of the stubbornness with the run game, which I think they need, even though I started this diatribe talking about, I don't think it's a very good run blocking offensive line. They have one of the better running backs in the NFL. And this is your identity that you've sold into with your tight ends. And like, it doesn't need to be the best run blocking offensive line for you to be running the ball more than you are. especially with the lack of wide receivers that you have. Like, just the way the personnel is, I want to see it more, even if it is more runs into stacked boxes and potentially unfavorable looks. And I think you can get that more if Mason Rudolph's the quarterback, which again is, I want to see it for a game. Let's just see what it looks like, get the information. And then if Rodgers is healthy and it doesn't look great, we can go right back to him. One last thing on the offense. We talked about Darnell Washington yesterday. And I guess this is maybe two things, and wow, he's just amazing. I don't know that I have much more than that, but like, continue to feed him targets, continue to have him playing all the time as much as he possibly can at 300 pounds, because he's such an advantage in the run game as a blocker and in the passing game as a blocker and as a route runner. Um, Outside of that, in the Steelers passing game, Roman Wilson is the wide receiver 2 now. Like, Darnell Washington, now he's the tight end 1. Like, that's established. Roman Wilson is also becoming the wide receiver 2. And that's probably overdue. Like, I think he's been pretty good all year. There have been some mistakes, some mental stuff. It's the onboarding has been slow. He's a young player on a Mike Tomlin coach team. Of course, the onboarding has been slow. Mike Tomlin doesn't give them chances to make mistakes. See Caleb Johnson. But he ran 24 routes to Austin's 17, I believe it was. That's a change in the right direction. I like Calvin Austin as a wide receiver 3. I think there's more upside with Roman Wilson to potentially be like an actual wide receiver 2. And I just want to see him. I want to see that number even go up a little bit more, especially if Rudolph is the quarterback against the Bears, because I think the deep and intermediate game there's gonna be a bit more happening there. So I think he's probably the better receiver than Calvin Austin at this point. And that's just a size thing with Austin. Like, he's just so small and he can win on the outside with his speed. He can give you some vertical stretch, but he isn't really doing that. He hasn't really been giving you much after the catch. So I would take Roman Wilson's like kind of downfield zone, finding the soft spots in zone, that kind of savvy he has, and the toughness as an undersized receiver that I think operates pretty well over the middle of the field. So I'm encouraged by that. Again, it usually takes till week 11 for Tomlin to start playing the right young guys, and we're seeing that again. Caleb Johnson also, I wouldn't mind if he got some more touches, especially once Warren went out. He did start to, but you know, you're not going to take him away from Jaylen Warren, but I'd be fine taking him away from Kenneth Gainwell in that case. All right, to the defense, which I think has made like a full, it's not a like mid-season facelift. Like, you kind of think about that with trade deadline additions or like a free agent signing, like, oh, they need a little facelift, this, slight alteration, whatever, pull something a little tighter. They got like reconstructive surgery. Like, it's completely a different unit, schematically, structurally, in a lot of ways, the personnel, and it's so much better because this is the way a team with a dominant defensive line, and we can quibble a little bit about dominant, but a defensive line that's loaded with talent needs to be playing football. Like, this is how you have to do it. You have to play more zone coverage, more cloud coverage, shell coverage, whatever you want to call it, that is going to limit explosive plays, make the quarterback hold on to the ball longer, read things out, check it down more, move the ball down the field more incrementally, because it gives your pass rush more opportunities, your 4-man rush, to win big, to have those splash plays, to make the negative plays, right? Like, it just gives you more opportunities to knock them off script, or to get a strip sack, or to get an interception, because you're playing more zone, which affords itself more turnovers. Like, the Steelers are always going to get some turnovers. It's such a cultural thing in that organization, and that's great. But now the way they're playing is going to probably even lead to more, because structurally, with the zone coverage, with the 4-man rush, like, you're not playing as you would think. Like, the high variance man coverage and blitz stuff would give you maybe more turnovers, but because you're in man, you're less likely to get interceptions. And it was just giving teams answers in the quick game, and they were killing them. So we can get into this specific matchup, But with this idea of Duggar and Ramsey, two deep safeties, like you're still getting some cover one, some cover three, but it's a lot of cover two, cover four, deep safeties, keep everything in front of you, which was, Tomlin's original ethos with coming from like Dungy Tampa 2 guy. Doing that now, you need to be really good in the red zone because teams are going to move it on you. You're in some ways being permissive of short gains and not the quick game killing you in the way that like Flacco did when you were playing man and you just didn't have the cover corners to do that. But in terms of more checkdowns and the run game sometimes because they're going to be running into lighter boxes, which is fine. That's the way to play football in the modern NFL. And Greg Olsen did an amazing. Greg Olsen is just the absolute best. If you're not like seeking out whatever game he's calling, you should be. But he talked. He was on Rams Seahawks yesterday, and talked a lot about how stopping the run and like loading up to stop the run against these heavy personnel looks like what the Steelers run offensively. And now the Rams are doing, and a lot of teams with multiple tight ends, extra offensive linemen. It's like an ego thing for a lot of these coaches. They need to put an extra linebacker or a nose tackle on the field. And we're going to go heavy personnel because they're not going to out tough us. They're not going to run the ball on us. And Chris Shula, the defensive coordinator for the Rams, goes, okay, run it. Like, maybe the one extra yard per carry you're going to average if I match your heavy personnel with more nickel and with two high safeties and don't load the box, that's not worth the potential 5 to 10% uptick in explosive play rate you're going to get from putting more heavy bodies on the field where you can exploit it in your play action passing game, right? And the Steelers now are in kind of that world with these two high safeties, the way they play it a little more split field and stuff, where you're going to be a little bit more permissive, right? Like teams are going to run it on you. That doesn't necessarily mean there's a problem. And there is if they're gashing you and like hitting big explosives in the run game. But because you have layers in your defense now and aren't so pulled to the line of scrimmage, you're probably going to limit those pretty well. They gave up a couple against the Bengals, but it wasn't terrible. So teams are going to march the ball down the field on you sometimes, and they're going to end up in and around the red zone sometimes, because if you don't get those negative plays, you don't get those splash plays, they can kind of cobble together these long drives. That's kind of the way this type of defense exists. So you got to be good in the red zone. And the Rams are amazing in the red zone. The Steelers are also really good in the red zone. By success rate, better than the Rams. The Steelers all season, which is not the whole time they've been playing this type of defense, but in general, just their red zone defense, which is going to be, they're not playing like two deep shells in the red zone necessarily. Their red zone defense, they're third in red zone success rate behind only the Broncos and the Packers this season at 36.7%. That's an amazing number. They're seventh in EPA per play at negative 0.07. Not quite as good. You would think that would even actually be higher because the number of turnovers they had like in the early season against the Patriots and teams like that kind of like buoying that number, because that's going to affect. An interception is still just a negative play by success rate. So it's just bad, fail. Essentially, that's pass, fail, that's fail. By EPA per play, that's going to like boost it way up. So I would have actually thought the EPA numbers would have been higher because of the amount of red zone turnovers that they've gotten than the success rate numbers. And that's actually encouraging that the success rate is so high because there's probably going to be a little more variance in that EPA number based on turnovers and touchdowns. So I think it just makes so much more sense. If you have a good red zone defense, you can be a little bit more permissive to limit explosive plays and team scoring outside the red zone. You can let them march it on you a little bit because you can bow up pretty well. And it gives you more chances for those negative plays to happen with your defensive line. So I really like the way that they played against the Bengals schematically and the way that they've been playing in recent weeks. They blitzed Flacco. This is a team that went out and got Darius Slay and traded for Jalen Ramsey because Mike Tomlin was obsessed with the idea of like blitzing on 40 to 50% of dropbacks. I think you saw the stuff I think he saw the blitz rate. This is just conjecture, but I think he saw the blitz rates of like a Brian Flores and was like, I need to do that. And his idea of that was just like 6-man pressure with man coverage behind. When in reality, the stuff Flores is doing is he's like dropping too deep. He's playing too deep shell zones behind a 7-man pressure. Like he's just doing absurd things. And he's so schematically unique that you're just not going to replicate that, especially the way Mike Tomlin likes to blitz, which is typically not with very many stunts in games. Like it's just straight adding bodies to the rush. They've been stunting a little bit more now that they've been living in a 4-man pass rush world lately, which again, I like. But they were obsessed with that idea. We're going to be a blitz and man coverage team. They recognized that they got the wrong corners for it because I don't know what convinced them that multiple 30-plus-year-old corners were going to be able to hold up in that world, but they were, and it was wrong. And they ate a big old piece of humble pie and switched it up, and they blitzed Flacco on just 17.1% of his dropbacks. Some of that's game script, but not all of it. They just didn't blitz him nearly as much. He went 3 for 7 for 32 yards against the blitz. Oh, look, if you're not blitzing so often, it's a little bit more effective. He had a 17.3 passer rating. In week 7, they blitzed him on 32.7% of his dropbacks. Not an obscene number by any stretch for the Steelers this season, especially. They've had multiple like over 50 blitz rate performances, which is just crazy in the NFL. But in that week, in week 7, he went 10 for 15 for 113 yards, had an 89 passer rating. Not amazing numbers, but meaningfully different with a much higher blitz rate. They also played a lot more man coverage behind those blitzes and in general. In week 7 against man coverage, Flacco went 10 for 17 for 109 yards and a touchdown with 6 catches on 7 targets for Jamar Chase. Against man coverage in week 11, the Bengals, Flacco went 1 for 3 for 7 yards, according to PFF's numbers and charting. 1 target to Chase, no catches, 2 catches for both the catches, or yeah, the completions went to Yourish, the number 3 receiver. So that's just such a better plan. When you are going to play man, bracket Chase and Higgins, which they did a lot. You need 2 deep safeties to do that. They bracketed those guys really well. And okay, if Yourish kills Eccles over the middle and you beat us that way, all right, like that's fine. And that's just, it's such a better way to live. It's such a better way to live. And I love that the coaching staff has gotten to this point. I didn't think they were going to get there. I thought they were too stubborn. I thought they were too kind of stuck in their ways. Clearly, that's not the case. And Mike Tomlin is adapting in a really huge way. And Terrell Austin, they deserve credit for it. I don't, this is not me going back on I'm ready for a regime change, but, got to give them their flowers, clap it up for the boys on that one. Like they've done a really nice job. And they're playing to their talent. Do they deserve, this is a fun conversation that I just thought of. Actually, do they deserve credit for now playing this defense the way it always should have been played, right? Like this comes up in the Heisman Trophy conversation, and just indulge me in this aside, but Fernando Mendoza is now the odds-on favorite to win the Heisman after his game-winning drive against Penn State, a really bad Penn State team this year, which was an amazing game-winning drive. It included like this crazy game-winning touchdown catch from Omar Cooper Jr., their awesome wide receiver. He did it without his number 1 wide receiver. But that whole game, Mendoza was like pretty pedestrian. He had a hugely costly interception in the 4th quarter that let Penn State take the lead. So he even needed that game-winning drive. And yet he shoots up ahead of Ohio State quarterback Julian Sayin in the Heisman odds, after saying the week before against Penn State had the most efficient performance by an Ohio State quarterback by EPA per dropback this century against a Power 4 opponent. The most efficient overall since CJ Stroud against Toledo. Like, why aren't we crediting the guy who destroyed that defense? Instead, we're crediting the guy who played bad enough to be trailing, so then he had a heroic moment. Like the logic there doesn't make sense. So in this case, should I give Tomlin and Austin credit for the changes that they've made, the schematic changes that they've made that are playing this defense the right way to its strengths on the D line, winning with 4 up front, making quarterbacks hold on to the ball so you can create negative plays, living in zone coverage with Jalen Ramsey playing safety, which Minka Fitzpatrick could have played split field safety. They didn't do it with him, which is one of the reasons they had so many problems in coverage last year because they were relying on him to be the post safety almost all the time. I still think that trade's good because Ramsey's been awesome. But do they deserve credit for making the change after they're the ones that did the wrong thing? Or should they get dinged for not doing the right thing from the beginning? I mean, probably the latter, but still, like, at least they got to the right answer eventually. So good. It's a better place for this defense to be. And I don't know that it necessarily cost them any losses in game. I mean, other than the Bengals game, right? Like if this team is at 7-3 going into a matchup with the Bears, you feel a lot better about their chances to win the division and make the playoffs. So yeah, I mean, I guess it kind of cost them that, and they came back and did it right this time. This is the Mendoza thing. Like they came back and did it right this time, and they get all the credit for the changes, but it never should have been wrong in the first place. To that pass rush, because all these changes, adjustments, we've talked about the secondary, and that's mostly where they're happening. There isn't that much you can change up front other than like the amount that you're blitzing or who you're playing. Nick Herbig should be playing all the time because he was fantastic again. He had 5 pressures against the Bengals in this one with a 22% pass rush win rate, according to PFF's numbers. ESPN analytics numbers for pass rush win rate have been even more kind to Herbig all season. He's been like number 1 or 2 on their chart pretty much the entire way. I don't know what their numbers were for this specific game, but PFF had him at 22% pass rush win in this one, 5 pressures. In games with over 50 snaps played defensively for Herbig, he's averaging 5 pressures and 1.2 sacks. It's obscene production. And yet when Highsmith is healthy, this guy plays 25 snaps a game. It's ridiculous. Like he should be playing 50 snaps to 60 snaps every time. And Highsmith rotate in, like keep a deep rotation, get Watt out of there more because as he's aging, he's got to play fewer snaps and be more impactful with them. You have the depth to do it when Highsmith's healthy. But regardless, like Herbig has to play because he's been absolutely fantastic. And then another guy, also from Wisconsin, Keanu Benton has quietly like started to round into form, the form we thought he was going to take when he was really impressive as a rookie. The last 3 games, 2 pressures and a sack, 4 pressures and a sack, 4 pressures. He had no sacks against Cincy, but his pressure numbers are really high. He had a 25% pass rush win rate against the Bengals per PFF. So he's been a lot better. Like the nose tackle stuff, it's still not good when he's there. And he's just not a nose. But that doesn't mean he's not a really useful defensive lineman. And when they have him at 3 tech, like he's just kind of wrecking shop lately. He's been really, really good. And Derek Harmon was kind of supposed to be the one that was going to give the real kick to the interior pass rush. He's been just okay, like mostly a little bit invisible. That's not always terrible for a defensive lineman. Like I think he's helped them stabilize things in the run game. And that's even more important now that they're playing with lighter boxes and having 2 deep safeties instead of always having Chuck Clark or Deshaun Elliott down in the box. So the defensive line is even more important in the run defense in that way. So, Harmon's playing fairly well, but Benton is the one that's been splashing. And he's been really important to their pass rush. Guys like that, guys like Herbig are gonna get one-on-ones because Watt and Hayward get a lot of attention paid to them. You got to take advantage of them. Benton and Herbig have been doing it. So these changes that the Steelers have made, I keep saying that word, the too high safety stuff that they're going to more and more. They're not like exclusively living in it. The Kyle Duggar interception was cover one robber. Like, oh, look, it actually works when that's your changeup instead of just the only pitch you throw. But for it to work, you do have to be able to get home with a four-man rush. Like that's kind of the basis of all these, because this isn't like full-on Fangio ball, but the basis of any kind of Vic Fangio-esque defense is you win up front with four. And the Steelers are starting to do that. I mean, they've always been able to do that. They have the bodies up there for sure. They're now letting those guys do that, and it's the reason. So while all the shifting around is happening on the back end, the reason you can make those adjustments is because you have the defensive front that you do. So this defense in recent seasons has always gotten massively exposed. This defense being the Steelers defense, not this type of defense that the Steelers are playing, but the Steelers in general defensively have gotten massively exposed in the playoffs and anytime they've played a good team. That kind of happened against the Chargers, though their issues were more on offense. They held the Colts in check really well. Was that this is the first time they're playing that way and the Colts are not ready for it? Or was that this is actually a sustainable model that's going to work against one of the best offenses in the NFL? I don't know. Like, we still need more data points, and I'm intrigued to see what happens against the Bears, because something I pointed out on yesterday's show for the instant reaction was, okay, now you're living in a world where Jalen Ramsey isn't around the line of scrimmage. He's not your nickel. It's Brandon Echols, significantly lighter player. It's Joey Porter Jr. Maybe it's Darius Slay or it's James Pierre, but not either way. Like, Pierre was fantastic in coverage. None of those guys are great tacklers, and you just played against a team that really spreads things out, and the Colts are a spread offense. The Chargers ran the ball on you pretty well, and now you're going to play the Bears, who, while they live in 11 personnel a lot, they're not like this one of these jumbo teams. They live in 11 personnel, but they do it with pretty often with pretty condensed splits, as the Steelers do and as a lot of teams do. And they make your defensive backs fit the run. I don't know that the Steelers have the defensive backs to actually fit the run in that way. And a lot of teams, the AFC playoff picture is pretty murky right now, but a lot of the teams that they're potentially going to play are going to dare them to do that, and to dare Echols and Porter and Pierre or Slay, which it should be Pierre. It should not be Slay even when he gets healthy, to tackle. And while, yes, you can be permissive in the run game, and I still don't think that means you should add another body to the box, because it just makes you so susceptible to the explosive pass game. That's just so much more important. But our team's really going to give them problems in the run game in a way where they have to allocate more resources to it and hit explosives in the run game. I think it's possible. The Bears are going to be a really good litmus test. And then the Bills as well, because the Bills do a lot of 6 offensive line stuff. They're not like this Shanahan McVay condensed split team, but they are pretty heavy personnel, pretty heavy run game team that has a quarterback that's going to run, and he does a lot at the perimeter. He's a nightmare to tackle regardless of who it is, but you like your chances with Jalen Ramsey being the one to do it instead of Brandon Echols. So that I certainly still see as a weakness for this defense. That being said, I don't know that this is a defense that's really going to get like just totally blown out of the water. They got rolled by the Packers in the second half, but that was kind of before these schematic changes. So we haven't seen like the Chargers moved it on them pretty well. To me, that was the defense just let go of the rope. Like, the offense was putting them out there for so many snaps, and the Steelers' offense has been one of the lowest in the league in just terms of total snaps. They're not controlling the ball. They're leaving their defense really exposed. So that's what I think happened in the Chargers game. Like, they just kind of let go of the rope. I'm hesitant to make a bold proclamation, But this defense is definitely a lot more punchy. I think this defense is definitely a lot more punchy against the Bills and the Ravens. And the Ravens are going to be a really good test case because they're going to make your defensive backs tackle. With Lamar and with Derrick Henry and with the fullback stuff they do and the perimeter running as they do it. I think it's gonna be a bit more punchy than it has been in years past in against the good teams. Is that gonna be enough for this team to win a playoff game? No, I don't think so. I don't think I'm not gonna take anything away from beating the Bengals as you should, where I'm saying now the ceiling is raised and this team can make an AFC championship game or anything like that. I don't even know that this team for sure is gonna make the playoffs. But I think defensively, it's in the best the Steelers defense under Mike Tomlin is in the best place coming down the stretch of a season that it's been in a couple of years. And that's really important. So again, like they should have been playing this way for the whole time. Credit to them for doing it now. And we'll see how well it can hold up against, I think, an offense next week that isn't amazing, but I think can give them problems because stylistically. And then against really good offenses. And what do you do then? So we'll see. I'm excited. I'm excited to see that, at least on that side of the ball. And sometimes I feel like the Steelers are very resigned to their fate of they're going to beat enough of the bad teams to get into the playoffs anytime they play a good team, unless they just catch them, throwing an absolute clunker, they're going to lose that game. I don't know. The AFC is pretty bad. And if you have a defense that really turns it on, you could be in business to kind of make a little bit of noise down the stretch and make it interesting for that week 18 game against the Ravens. I don't think it happens, but I'm closer to saying it would, certainly by a lot, than I was after the Chargers debacle, and that had everything to do with the offense. So that's a huge part of this conversation as well. And again, I want to see Mason Rudolph next week. I want to know what that looks like. I'm not certain it'll be better, but I think there's a decent chance it will. So we'll be back for that one. Instant Reaction Podcast. Be here with us on the Still Curtain Podcast. You can follow me on Blue Sky at Yourish3. And you can check out everyone at stillcurtain.com's written work there at stillcurtain.com. Again, a big thanks to FanSided, stillcurtain.com, and everyone for powering this awesome podcast and for giving, me and us a place to talk Steelers football, because it's a lot of fun to do. Again, a programming note, the Wednesday show with Tommy and Shane still happening, won't be live. They're testing out some pre-recorded stuff and seeing how everyone likes that. So give your feedback of that in the comments on Wednesday when that show comes out. And as always, like and comment and subscribe and everything, because it really helps out our show. We love doing this for you. We hope you love checking it out. Tell your friends, and we'll be back. I'll be back next Sunday after the Steelers play the Bears for the Instant Reaction show with Mark Powell. And we'll have Shane Kubis hopping on as well, because that's been a lot of fun to have him involved with that show. A big thank you. And until then, have a good one. As always, go Steelers.